Good evening. Welcome back to church tonight. Glad you made it with us. Couple announcements. Thank you to everyone who came to the Grant baby shower today. I'm sure it was a good time. Don't forget the 90th birthday drop-in for Mitchell Castle on April 12th from 3 to 5. And they're trying to get 90 birthday cards for him. I don't know where they're at on that, but they're in the vestibule if anybody wants to count. That's what I'm hearing. Count them up. If there's 90, don't make any more. Easter egg hunt is April 16th at 6 p.m. That's mine and Beck's wedding anniversary, so thank y'all for coming out to that. The rain date is Friday, April 18th. That's our date night that week. So either way, it's going to mess us up. But the Easter Sunday schedule, remember 7:30 sunrise service, no breakfast to follow, and then regular service after that with no evening service. Joy Agers lunch, April 24th at Twin Dragons. Sign up if you would like to go. Let's open up in prayer. Dear Lord, thank you for today. Thank you for being with us, for watching over us, protecting us, dear God. Thank you so much for the rain that's fallen and allowing us to come back safely, dear Lord. Pray that you'll just open up our hearts and our minds to just take in the message, dear God, and just show the world about you. In your name we pray. Amen.
Oh
do thank you for coming back tonight. Appreciate it. With the rain and a substitute, you never know how many people is actually going to show up. So, it's pretty good. No, see a little patch of strangers back here in the back. Some of Easley's finest warriors back there. So, give them a Holly Springs welcome before you leave here tonight. And boys come up here and saved y'all from the fire. So, congratulate them. No, appreciate them coming tonight. A couple weeks ago, I taught Sunday school, and the title of the lesson was very deceiving because it said, Finding God's Purpose. I got so excited. I was like, finally, after 35 years, the genie ball has arrived to just rub it and find God's purpose. But no, it was not. It's like everything else. A lot of trial and error. Inner digging to find out what you're good at, what's your talents, what's your abilities, and then basically just trying something. You know, that's, after all these years, that's kind of how I found to find God's purpose, is you actually have to start doing things to see what God's purpose for your life is. And then, you know, we hear all the tales of someone going out on a limb and doing something, and they come back and they say, you know, I love it when a plan comes together. Or they come back and say, wow, the stars really aligned on that one. Or they may come back, this was a Cheryl saying, it was so easy, I just knew the Lord had a hand in it. Or it just went smooth as silk. Don't you love it when that happens? When you go out and you do something and it's just perfect. But what happens when that's not the case? When you go out and you just get beat up, it feels like you've been 9 rounds in a match with Rocky or something, and you come out of it and you just have a gut punch. Is that God's will for your life? Is it? Is God's will supposed to be easy? Or is it easy for some and it's hard for the other? It's very, very confusing when you dive into it like that. But tonight we're going to go through a story and see that, yes, sometimes God's will for us is very hard. The purpose that we go down and that we're trying to achieve is tough. It's not easy. It's not smooth as silk. There's a lot of bumps in the roads that can throw us off course very fast. But in the end, it's still God's purpose. So that's what we're going to dive into tonight. And it's the story of Nehemiah. Shorter book in the Old Testament, but I love it. We have a ton of scripture tonight, so we're going to be flipping through Nehemiah very quickly. But we'll try to keep everybody up to pace. But we're going to start out tonight in 445 BC. All right? This morning's date was 406 BC. It's a roundabout date. Tonight's date is, church is falling apart on this side. It's old, Kendrick. Be careful. Tonight's date is 445 BC. It's a hard stamp date in history. We know this date because we can backdate kings and all that. And some of the people we're going to meet tonight, first is Nehemiah. Who was Nehemiah? Nehemiah was actually a Jew who had never been to Jerusalem. Nehemiah was born in captivity in the country of Persia. All right, modern day Iran is where Nehemiah was. He was also the cupbearer to the king. The king's name was King Artaxerxes. He was the king of Persia. And Nehemiah's job was basically to be his attendant day in and day out. So who is Artaxerxes? Artaxerxes is the son of Xerxes. You maybe heard of Xerxes. If you've ever read the book of Esther, that king and Esther, Ahasuerus, is Xerxes. All right, if you've ever studied history and you've learned about the 300 fighting the Spartan 300 fighting the Persians at Thermopylae, that was King Xerxes, who was the king of the Persians during that battle of the 300. So, really, real history here that we can timestamp back. So we're in 445 BC. Judah, the country where the Jews were from, They had been captured by Babylon and King Nebuchadnezzar in 586 BC. So about 140 years before our story took place, all the Jews had been captured and took away. That's why Nehemiah had never been to Jerusalem before. In 538 BC, some of the Jews were allowed to return to Jerusalem. Persia overthrew Babylon and said, y'all can go back home. So some went back to Jerusalem, and the temple that was destroyed when Babylon took over in Jerusalem, they rebuilt it in 515 BC. But where we're going to pick up our story tonight is they had went back and rebuilt the temple, but the walls around the city were still broken down, and the gates were burned out. So if you think about ancient history, the walls were the city. A city without walls was not a city at all. It was open to outside raids whenever any country wanted to come in because they had no security cameras. All right? So the walls were the city. And that's where we're going to pick up tonight's story, is in 445 BC in Nehemiah chapter 1, and we're going to start in 1 through 4. A lot of verses tonight, so just hang in there. So, Nehemiah 1, 1 through 4, the words of Nehemiah, the son of Hakaliah. It came to pass in the month of Kislev in the 20th century, as I was in Shushan the citadel, Hananiah, one of my brethren, came to me from Judah. And I asked them concerning the Jews who escaped, who had survived the captivity, and concerning Jerusalem. And they said to me, the survivors who are left from captivity and the providence are there in great distress and reproach. The walls of Jerusalem is also broken down, its gates are burned with fire. So it was when I heard these words that I sat down and wept and mourned for many days. I was fasting and praying before the God of heaven. So that's where we pick up tonight in what else could go wrong? The story of Nehemiah. And the first is the weight of a burden. So Nehemiah, we pick up very first thing, he gets a report from a friend who's come from Jerusalem. And he said, how's things in Jerusalem? Remember, that's Nehemiah's homeland. That's where his family is from. And he hears that it's not going well in Jerusalem at all. That their walls are torn down, their gates are burned with fire, and they're open to being captive again, is what he's worried about. So we pick up in 1, 8, and 11. In chapter 1, verse 8, it's, remember, I pray the word that you commanded your servant Moses, saying, if you are unfaithful, I will scatter you among the nations. Remember, we're talking about the Israelites this morning, how Joshua and them was going to go in and how they had to be faithful to the law of God. Well, between 1400 BC and 445 BC, they were not faithful. That's why they had been taken captive. So he's remembering what God said about scattering them. And then you go to verse 11. O Lord, I pray, please let your ear be attentive to the prayer of your servant and to the prayer of your servants who desire to fear your name, and let your servant prosper this day, I pray, and grant him mercy in the sight of this man, for I was the king's cupbearer. So chapter 1, Nehemiah gets this call that, hey, it's not going good back in the homeland. And for a man who had never been there, he gets a really, really heavy burden. All right? And he ends this with, I was the king's cupbearer. Why would he put that in there? Because that's actually a big deal to actually go. You know, most of us, if we wanted to just pack up and go somewhere, I mean, at the end of the day, we're going to pack up and go. But Nehemiah was the king's cupbearer. He was one of the top trusted officials in the kingdom of Persia. All right? He served the king his wine and his drinks, but he had to be trusted because everybody was out to get the king. So he was basically his right-hand man in everything he did. So it was a very big job for him to do. Picking up in Nehemiah 2, 1 through 6, and it came to pass in the month of Nisan in the 20th year of King Artaxerxes, when wine was brought before him, that I took the wine and gave it to the king. Now listen to his daily task. Now I had never been sad in his presence before. Therefore the king said to me, why is your face sad, since you are not sick? This is something but sorrow from the heart. So I became dreadfully afraid and said to the king, may the king live forever. Why should my face not be sad when the city, the place of my father's tombs, lies in waste and its gates burned with fire? So we see we're in the totally next month here. He had dealt with this burden for the whole month to where his presence in the face of the king was distraught. You just didn't walk up to the king and look sad back in those times. That could be a death sentence for you if the king was feeling like it. So as he walked in, the king noticed he was sad. If you notice, he doesn't have an excuse. He just simply starts pouring his heart out of the weight that's on his The king said to me, what do you request? So I prayed to the God of heaven, and I said to the king, if it please the king, your servant has found favor in your sight. I ask that you send me to Judah, to the city of my father's tombs, that I may rebuild it. The king said to me, with the king sitting beside him, how long will your journey be, and when will you return? So it pleased the king to send me, and I set a time. So we see Nehemiah had this big burden weighing on his heart for a place he'd never been, basically people he had never talked to. And he volunteered for a task that he had never been assigned to. This morning was easy. God came to Joshua and said, Joshua, I want you to do this, and you need to be prepared this way, and this way to accomplish it. Tonight we pick up Nehemiah where he has a burden for something, but God never come to him and said, Nehemiah, I need you to go to Jerusalem and do this. How many of y'all sitting in this church tonight have volunteered to do something for this church and God never asked you to do it? I have. I mean, personally, God's never just said, Johnny, do this. Never. But I've had burdens that I should probably do something. To me, that's still God talking to you. It's just in an inner spirit. So he volunteered for a task God never assigned him. He's going to a place he's never been to deal with problems that he did not foresee. All right? He had no revelation from God. He was just burdened for it. So the first thing is Nehemiah, the weight of a burden. Now we're going to pick up the story where he actually gets to Jerusalem. They're working on the wall. So the second thing tonight is the words of a bully. You would think when you volunteered for a task to go from present-day Iran to present-day Israel, a couple 1,000-mile journey, that God would make it the easiest road possible, right? Well, we're about to see all the distractions that come in when Nehemiah is simply trying to go back and rebuild the walls of God's chosen city. So picking up in Nehemiah chapter 2, verse 18 and 19. So they said, let us rise up and build. Then they set their hands to do this good work. Here's our key characters. But when Sanballat, the Horonite, Tobiah, the Ammonite official, and Geshem, the Arab, heard of it, they laughed at us and despised us and said, what is this thing that you are doing? Will you rebel against the king? We just picked up these three characters that by the end here in a minute, you're going to hate these guys. Because every time they start making progress, these guys show up to start making distractions. And that is same true in 21st century America. Whenever we put our head to the grindstone to start doing something, if you're not careful, you're going to start being distracted by things around you. And that's these characters right here. The first thing they say is, will you rebel against the king? That's the first thing they say. It's not, why are you doing this? Who are you? Or anything. They're trying to immediately pin a crime on Nehemiah for trying to rebuild the walls of this city, telling him, what are you doing, trying to rebel against the king of Persia? So we're going to skip over to chapter 4, verse 1 through 3. It says, but it so happened when Sanballat heard that we were rebuilding the wall that he was furious and very indignant and mocked the Jews. And he spoke before his brethren, the army of Samaria, and said, what are these feeble Jews doing? Will they fortify themselves? Will they offer sacrifices? Will they complete it in a day? Will they revive the stones from the heaps of rubbish, stones that are burned? Now Tobiah the Ammonite was beside him and said, whatever they build, if even a fox goes upon it, he will break down their stone wall. So first they come to him and say, what are y'all trying to do, rebel? That's what y'all are doing, is inciting a rebellion. Next they come to him and they start mocking him. They start saying, what are you going to do? Offer sacrifices around here? Mocking their religious practices, mocking the way they build the wall. Telling them, if you build it, but it's not even going to stand up. You don't even know what you're doing. All right? Skip down to verse 7. Now, when it happened, when Sanballat, Tobiah, the Arabs, the Ammonites, and the Ashdolites heard that the walls of Jerusalem were being restored and the gaps were beginning to be closed, that they became very angry. And all of them conspired together to attack Jerusalem and create confusion. So first we have them trying to tell them that we're inciting a rebellion, trying to scare them, scare tactic into quit. Next you have them making fun of what they're doing to try to get them to quit. And now they're angry that progress has kept going, so they come to them a third time, and this time they're just going to attack them, start creating confusion. Nobody wants to work on the wall when you're being attacked from all sides. That's not the last time they come. Go to chapter 6, 1 through 7. And it happened when Sanballat, Tobiah, and Geshem the Arab, and the rest of our enemies heard that I had rebuilt the wall, and that there was no breaks left in it. But at the time I had not hung the doors and the gates at Sanballat, Geshem sent to me, saying, come, let us meet together among the villages and the plains of Ono. All right, so this time they've got the walls done, haven't got the gates built, and this time they want to have a meeting. So they tried to incite a rebellion. They tried to make fun of them, tried to create confusion. Now they want to have a meeting. So I sent messengers to them saying, I am doing a great work so that I cannot come down. Why should the work cease while I leave it and go down to you? But they sent me this message 4 times, and I answered them in the same manner. Then Sanballat sent his servant to me as before the 5th time with an open letter in his hand. It was written, it is reported among the nations, and Geshem says that you and the Jews plan to rebel. Therefore, according to these rumors, you are rebuilding the wall king. So not only are you planning to rebel, you, Nehemiah, are trying to become king of Israel. That is your plan, according to Sanballat. And you have also appointed prophets to proclaim concerning you at Jerusalem, saying, there is a king in Judah. Now these matters will be reported to the king, talking about Artaxerxes in Persia. So therefore come and let us counsel together. So we've got 4 or 5 times these same guys have come to them with distractions. Constant distractions, different tactics each time. You're inciting a rebellion. Making fun of what you're doing, never going to work. Never, ever going to work. Coming to them, saying, hey, we're just going to kill you. Create some confusion around here. They even have to start laying stones with a sword in one hand. It comes to that point where they're having to do that. And lastly, coming to them saying, Nehemiah, this whole thing is you're wanting to be king, and I'm about to send a letter to Persia. All right? It's that 21st century, I'm going to send an email on this. So, had this worked before? Had they done this before and it actually worked? Flip over to Ezra chapter 4, book right before Nehemiah, starting in verse 12 of Ezra chapter 4. You see, starting in verse 11, this is a copy of the letter that they sent to him, to King Artaxerxes, from your servants, the men of the region beyond the river, and so forth. Let it be known to the king that the Jews who came up to you have come to us from Jerusalem and are building the rebellious and evil city, and are finishing its walls and repairing its foundations. Let it be known to the king that if this city is built and the wall is completed, they will not pay tax, tribute, or custom, and the king's treasury will be diminished. And they go on talking about what that's going to happen if they continue this building. Now, this was before Nehemiah. So someone had already come back one time and tried, and their scare tactics worked this time. So if you go to verse 23, it says, now when the copy of King Artaxerxes' letter was read before Rehum, the scribe, and their companions, they went up in haste to Jerusalem against the Jews, and by force of arms made them cease. So, someone had already tried this before. Someone had had that burden that Nehemiah had and had stepped out, and the distraction stopped them. The letter got to the king wrote a letter in, you need to stop, and someone come by force and made them quit. All right? So that's the distraction Nehemiah is seeing. People's telling him, you're trying to be king, you're trying to do a rebellion, you're trying to do this, you're trying to do that. What did Nehemiah reply? Go to Nehemiah 2:20, and we'll see his first reply when they came to him the first time. So I answered, this is Nehemiah talking, and said to them, the God of heaven himself will prosper us. Therefore we, his servants, will arise and build. You have no heritage or no right or no memorial in Jerusalem. All right, and then you go to 4 through 6. Nehemiah says, hear our God, for we are despised. Turn their reproach on their heads and give them as plunder to a land of captivity. Do not cover their iniquity, and do not let their sin be blotted out from before you, for they have provoked you to anger before the builders. So we built the wall, and the entire wall was joined together up to half its height, for the people had the mind to work. Skip to verse 9. Nevertheless, we made our prayer to God, and because of them, we set a watch against them day and night. And then the last reply, chapter 6, 8, and 9. Nehemiah said, then I sent to him, saying, no such things as you say are being done, but you invent them in your own heart. For they are all trying to make us afraid, saying, their hands will be weakened in their work, and it will not be done. Therefore, O God, strengthen my hands. What did Nehemiah keep do when distractions kept coming from every side? When the bump in the road kept getting bumpier and bumpier and bumpier, he kept working. What else did he do? Kept praying to God to see exactly what his response should be. So the distractions keep coming. Distractions keep coming today, left and right, left and right. There is an excuse to get out of everything you sign up for. But there's also a reason to keep going, keep doing it, just like what Nehemiah did. So we got the weight of the burden. We've got the words of a bully. And lastly, we got the worry of bondage. So Nehemiah had an internal burden. He had outside distractions coming from those outside of Jerusalem. And now we're going to see where the last bump in the road was internal distractions. Things happening inside of Jerusalem. So Nehemiah chapter 5, 1 through 6, we see, and there was a great outcry of the people and their wives against their Jewish brethren. For there were those who said, we, our sons and our daughters, are many. Therefore, let us get grain that we may eat and live. They're running out of food. They're running out of food inside Jerusalem, same city they're trying to build the walls around. There were also some who said, we have mortgaged our lands and our vineyards and our houses to buy grain because of the famine. There were also those who said, we have borrowed money for the king's tax on our lands and our vineyards. Yet now our flesh is the flesh of our brethren, and our children as their children. And indeed are forcing our sons and our daughters to be slaves, and some of our daughters have been bought into slavery. It is not our power to redeem them and have our lands and our vineyards. And Nehemiah said, and I became very angry when I heard their outcry and their words. So now we see Nehemiah has opposition on the inside. People are starving to death. They can't pay their taxes. So what are they doing? They're selling themselves into slavery. About the time they sell themselves into slavery, they'll get enough money to buy themselves back. They need food again. So what do? They sell themselves back into slavery. And then they can't get enough money to basically buy themselves back. Who's making money off this? The other Jews, the people that's supposed to be helping them, the people that's supposed to be banding together to build this city stronger. Basically, the people, their group of people, are trying to profit off of their calamity. So that's where we pick up Nehemiah saying, what in the world is going on? First, I was thousands of miles away. I heard about this problem. I came all the way here. The walls are in shambles. We start working on the walls. We start getting outside distraction. We minimize all that. We keep focused on the walls. And now what's he see? He sees his own people profiting off other people's hard times. Basically, they're having to sell themselves as slaves to get food to eat, and the Jews there making money off that. And then we see Nehemiah's response, starting in verse 7. After this serious thought, I rebuked the nobles and the rulers and said to them, each of you is exacting usury from his brother. So I called a great assembly together and said to them, according to our ability, we have redeemed our Jewish brothers who are sold to our nations. Now indeed, will you even sell your brothers, or should they be sold to us? So they were silenced and found nothing to say. Then I said, what are you doing is not good. You should not walk in fear of our God because of the reproach of the nations of our enemies. I also, with my brethren and my servants, am lending them money and grain. Please let us stop this usury. Restore now to them, even this day, their lands, their vineyards, their olive groves, their houses, and 100 other money and their grain, the new wine and the oil that you have charged them. So they said, we will restore it, and we will require nothing from it. We will do as you say. Then I called the priest and required an oath from them, saying, this would be according to the promise. Then I shook out the folds of my garment and said, so may God shake out every man from his house and from his property who does not perform this promise. Even thus may be shaken out and emptied. And all the assembly said, amen, and praised the Lord. The people did according to this promise. So Nehemiah has to start thinking by this time, is it even worth it? Was it even worth it for me to leave my cushy job in Persia, where I was a very, very trusted official in the court, to walk or ride on a horse, whatever, a couple thousand miles to Israel, to start working on a wall? I don't know if any of you have done masonry work, but it's no joke. Start working on a wall, start pushing out the outside distractions, to start coming in with all these people that's wanting to make profit off of themselves. Is it worth it? Have you ever sat back and volunteered something that you thought, this is what I need to be doing, to only get into the middle of it and think, is this worth it? Is it worth it for me to be doing this? Is this what God is wanting me to do? Now we're going to see Nehemiah's example. Chapter 5, starting in verse 14. Moreover, from the time I was appointed to be governor in the land of Judah, from the 20th year until the 32nd year, so for 12 years Nehemiah was there, neither I nor my brothers ate the governor's provisions, but the former governors who were before me laid burdens on the people and took their bread and wine from them, besides 40 shekels of silver. Yet even their servants bore rule over the people, but I did not do so because of the fear of God. Indeed, I also continued the work on the wall, and we did not buy any land. All my servants were gathered there for the work. So if you notice by this time, we've pretty much read the whole story of Nehemiah, and we've yet to hardly mention work on the wall because of all the distractions going on around him. And getting into the final thought tonight, it's some things worth doing are tough. Are you willing to do them? Is anybody willing to do them? And Nehemiah did go on to complete the wall. They set up the gates. He starts getting the government system set up in Jerusalem. He helps them through a lot of things going back to before captivity to get Jerusalem set on the right path. But for you and I, are little things worth it? Is there any other stories in the Bible like this where it was this hard to do God's will, where this many distractions was going on, where it was this tough of a time? Would God actually to do this? Romans 5:8 says, but God demonstrated his own love to us, and that while we were still sinners, Christ what? Died for us. So many times we get immune to that verse of Christ died for me and for you. That's a lot tougher than a guy coming to you while you're building a wall and saying, hey, you're just inciting a rebellion. Hey, your wall's going to fall down. Hey, something's going to happen. The verse that best demonstrates to me sometimes how hard God's purpose is for me and for you is Mark 14:35. It says, he went a little further, talking about Jesus, and fell on the ground and prayed that if it were possible, the hour might pass from him. All right, we're talking about Jesus. He's in the last hours of his life at this point. Jesus is fully God. Jesus is fully man. We forget that sometimes. Jesus knows what's about to happen, but he knows the fleshly part of him is going to have to endure every single bit of it. And frankly, he's not looking forward to it. These are bumps in the road. These are distractions to the purpose. So what does Jesus do? He went a little further and fell on the ground and prayed that if it were possible, this hour might pass. Now remember, Jesus is 35 years old, 33, 35. He's a grown man. This is the middle of the night. Where's he at? Middle of the woods. He's fallen down on the ground and praying, and he says, Abba, Father. What does that mean? Daddy. All things are possible for you. Take this cup away from me. Nevertheless, what I will, but your will be done. You got a grown man, God, laying on the ground in the middle of the night saying, Daddy, I don't want to do this. How tough is God's will? Sometimes it's tough. Sometimes it's easy. Sometimes it's very tough. So, some things worth doing are tough. Are you willing to do them? So, Tommy, you close in prayer.